Hi, everyone, and welcome back to LogTech Live. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm the host of LogTech Live and senior technology editor at the Journal of Commerce in my spare time. Really appreciate everyone who's tuned in today, especially if this is your first time joining us. Thanks so much. Hope you get a ton of value and a little bit of fun as you listen in and watch today. We have a really great show lined up. A good guest who I've known for a very long time, who I'm really excited to talk to about the technology that he and his company have developed around forwarding software. Um, I am back in DC as of 2 days ago, so half my brain is probably still in India, where I did the last couple episodes of LogTech Live. Slowly getting over the fog of jet lag. I'm getting, to steal a Danny Glover line, I'm getting too old for this stuff. But you do what you need to do, and it was great being in India. But super glad to be back in DC. Aside from, I apparently stepped into a time machine because polio is back now in the U.S., so we're back into the 40s. I don't know what's going on with the world. Crazy. We'll try to make sense of our little corner of the logistics technology world in the meantime over the next 45 minutes or so. Hey Rob, thanks for joining us as always. Really appreciate you chiming in or jumping in every episode. So let's go to news of the week because as with every week for the last seemingly 2.5 years, it's been a busy news week, even as the world did not stop for me to travel back from India. I want to highlight a story that is maybe not technology oriented specifically, but there is a technology element to it. And so my colleagues wrote this story middle of this week about the growth in July US imports. And I highlight this story because it shows the value, or I should say, sometimes the limited value of data, right? There was some predictions in May that imports into the US were going to decline significantly in July, specifically early July. And those predictions were based on essentially a single data point. And that sort of coming to light really motivated myself and my colleagues to go and find out from the market whether they were seeing what this prediction was essentially saying. And I mean, I lost track of the number of people I talked to about this. I'm sure my colleagues feel the same way. And what we heard overwhelmingly was this doesn't sound right. Yes, there are definitely some indicators that volume is slowing down, that we're not going to see the crazy Everest like historic highs of the second half of 21. But to see a drop on the magnitude of what was predicted, there would need to be some forcing function, the likes of which we've rarely seen over the last 2 years, right? Like the start of COVID, the great financial crisis, really like tectonic things, not just, you know, uh, volume slowing down off of historic highs. So, we waited patiently for the July numbers to come out, and they told us what everybody was telling us, which was that we were not seeing a decline at all. And in fact, July imports rose, and I believe it was the largest July in history in terms of U.S. imports. So not only did they not decline, they rose. So I think the value, I think the lesson learned, I think for us was it's really difficult to rely on a single data point to make kind of sweeping generalizations about a market as huge and nuanced as the Trans-Pacific trade from Asia to Europe to the U.S., much less Europe. So you really need to go and kind of canvas as far and wide as you possibly can to paint a picture and really understand what's going on. So just wanted to highlight that story, which was, I think, the most significant thing on GSC.com this week. The next story I wanted to highlight was one that I did earlier this week I think this was actually last week. I'm losing track of the weeks. Around a story that's been out in the news for a long time, and I actually haven't really written about this, and I'll give you a reason why I haven't written about it. But we wrote about kind of Slink.io, a logistics technology provider that it's been well chronicled. Their CEO was said to have spent company and personal money in a rather extravagant way, according to Business Insider, according to Forbes, according to a sports website called The Athletic. This has all been reported over a course of a couple months. Also, probably more significantly, some of their employees were receiving delayed paychecks or no paychecks for a very long time. And that was happening in tandem with some of the spending. So, I've had Chris on a bunch of different panels. The picture of him there is at our TPM Tech event that happened earlier this year. I've spoken to him a lot. For me, the important thing to the reader, and what I try to emphasize in the story is separating the product from the personality, right? From everything I've heard and been told, including by customers of Slink, the product is solid. There's not a ton of customers, right? So this is not like Maersk having an issue or DHL having an issue or name your major logistics service provider having an issue. This was relatively confined to their employees and the few customers that they have. And so it's important for me to say, well, what's the impact from a business perspective and a business continuity perspective of all this stuff that's been reported? And so that's what I attempted to try to answer here. Lots of good reporting from other outlets on kind of that palace intrigue and stuff that was going on outside outside of the product itself. But I tried to address the utility of the product itself in this story and kind of what happens next. So I encourage you to read that story if you get a chance. The next story I wanted to highlight, and this has been a continuing thread. You've heard us talk about it on this show. We've written about it. I've highlighted it. It came to light last Friday that FourKites, a major visibility provider in the logistics industry, had some layoffs. The numbers in terms of percentage were sort of in line with everybody else we're seeing. We're seeing sort of 5 to 8, maybe 10% among a lot of companies doing sort of proactive layoffs or RIFs or restructuring, whatever you want to call it, to sort of help them stretch out their balance sheet as far as they can, predicting maybe we're in a slowing period, right? So investors really want to see a little bit tighter control of those cash positions. And so this is another story. And one thing I struggle with, and I tweeted about this last week, is it can be very difficult for me to make sure that when I write about layoffs, that I'm not taking a company that is sort of in line with the rest of the industry and making sort of an example out of them. And similarly, I also don't want to take a company that does have a unique situation and just lump them in and sort of portray that as an industry-wide trend, right? So that's the challenge that I have. I'm not complaining. It comes with the job. But hopefully, as you read stories that I'm doing around kind of how the market is shifting, both from an investment perspective and existing companies, how they're sort of dealing with the market as it is, you have that in mind, that, right? Like, we don't want to take a company that's doing what a lot of other companies are doing and making a specific example out of them, nor do we want to take a company that does have unique circumstances and they are maybe really struggling and say, oh, this is indicative of the rest of the industry. So hopefully I'm doing a good job at that, and definitely encourage people to give me feedback if I'm not. So one last thing I'll talk about is my Substack newsletter from last week. I sort of delved into an issue that I think is really interesting. I've written a lot, including in my Substack, including on joc.com, including talking here about this sort of rise of partnerships between technology providers. And it's sort of become a necessary thing now. You can't really build everything yourself as a provider, especially early on, where you need to gain traction with a certain subset of customers doing a certain number of things product wise. You can't do everything all at once. You can't reach everybody all at once, or you will not get enough traction, right? So it's really important to partner. What's interesting is the competitive sort of landscape is constantly shifting. So companies that may have been cooperative and collaborative and true partners in the past, they might find themselves sort of competing in some ways too, right? So the newsletter last week was all about like how companies need to be eyes wide open about the benefits of partnering, right? You can scale and you can add potential new sales channels and new capability through effective partnerships. So they're necessary, but you have to go into each partnership knowing, or at least considering, hey, this company I'm partnering with might eventually be a competitor of mine, or they might, those lines between where we were complementing each other might start to blur a bit. So interesting topic, and I think one that will need to be revisited at some point down the road. Maybe we even have a whole LogTech live episode about that at some point. So with no further ado, I want to bring my guest on this week, Raghav Viswanathan. I hope I did not mess up your name. Of all people, I should not be messing up your name, but he is the CEO of a technology company called Freightify, and I'm delighted you could join us from Chennai, India today, Raghav.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, and big fan of your newsletter as well, and good to be here.
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate that. And compliments will get you everywhere, as but I swear I didn't know he was going to say that. So thanks for the vote of confidence in the newsletter, Raghav. So we've known each other a few years. I can remember I think the first time we met was we had tea in a hotel in Mumbai. And you sort of laid out kind of what you were trying to do. So I wonder if you could maybe give people some background on yourself and on Freightify, and just sort of like what the product is and who you're trying to reach with it.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. And with respect to me, so I'll start with my intro. So I come from a background of building technology myself. So this was way back in late 2000. So when 2009, 2010, when the whole banking industry was moving from a retail banking to an internet banking. So I was one of the software developers to help a large bank move from their legacy softwares to migrate into their cloud-based systems. So I've seen the digital twinning or transition happen in banking industry as a software engineer. And post my MBA, I got into DHL by not by choice, but by chance. I think most of the people in logistics picks you rather than you picking logistics. So when I got into DHL, or a large freight forwarding company, one of the global leaders, so I understood the processes in freight forwarding and logistics, and I could see a lot of parallels between banking and freight forwarding in terms of technology adoption. The only difference was the timeline. Banking really could pick up a lot of cues with respect to technology adoption, and they could move ahead in terms of taking in the technology and using it to their advantage, whereas forwarding took their time. So and at that point in time, especially markets like US, we could see large digital freight forwarders making the big news and raising capital. So I realized that there's a lot of potential to start a LogTech company, take the best practices in fintech, and then use it in logistics, and that's how Freightify was born. And we started as a marketplace. We started by providing technology for freight forwarders, but also helping them procure better from shipping lines. That was our whole concept. And the primary reason to do that was we were India focused at that point in time. And India as a market, we wanted to help small and mid-sized freight forwarders to procure better. And eventually, when pandemic happened, a lot of freight forwarders had to work from home. This was the time when the whole industry, which has never seen work from home, or which has never heard about work from home, were pushed to the back of the wall. And we realized that the technology that we built can be used by any freight forwarder across the world. And that was the time we became a vertical SaaS company, or we became a software as a service company, where our technology can be used by any freight forwarder. And I think I remember that you helped us running a campaign where we gave the platform free of cost for about a month or two for any freight forwarders who wanted to work from home, and you helped us spread the word as well. So that was the time we realized the market potential was global and not just specific to India. And since 2021, we've started selling our technology as a rate management and quoting platform exclusively for freight forwarders, small, mid-sized, large freight forwarders, depending on the size and the workflow they have. And it's been a year and a half now, and we have customers in 40 countries, more than 40 countries using our technology. and it's been going pretty well. And we really see that freight forwarders are using technology to their advantage, and the industry on the whole is adopting technology at a much faster pace than what it used to be pre-COVID.
Interesting. Can you can you specify a little bit in terms of the segments of the forwarding market that you're finding, that you're targeting, or that you're finding particular traction in? Is it mid market? Is it the smaller than small, true small size? Is it enterprise, or a mix of
Yeah.
the three?
So the primary problem that we are solving is to get data a lot more efficiently and in a structured way between the shipping liners and the freight forwarders, and thereby making freight forwarders a lot more agile and a lot more efficient when they are passing on the data to the exporters or importers. So our products are typically for freight forwarders of all sizes, and we have three products. We have a platform product typically for the small and mid market segment. We have an API product for digital freight forwarders who want to plug into shipping lines directly, and we have a contract reader product for the large traditional freight forwarders or the enterprise freight forwarders. So these are the three products that we have, and we are catering to all the segments. But our markets are around USA and or North America, for that matter, and Europe. So we have more than 50% of our revenue coming from Europe at this point in time, and US is something that we are also expanding. So we feel that the adoption, especially in these markets, are key because the cost of a resource or manpower is a lot for them to get the data from multiple sources, key that in an Excel sheet, and then share it with their customers. And by the time they share it with their customers, the data is already already not relevant, right, or obsolete, so for that matter. So we feel that there has to be a better data piping between the supply and the demand, and that's what banking did. They laid better pipes first, and then they started building on top of it. So we thought that it's better to build the piping for rates and quotes, and we are doing that for freight forwarders across the world.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the cost efficiency piece, because I mean, virtually every conversation I have with anyone who's sort of looking at the forwarding technology market, I was like, look, it's conceptually it's pretty easy, right? It's the execution, but like you either want to grow the size of the market that you can tap into effectively, or you want to cut the cost to serve those markets that you are tapping into. Ideally both, but if you want to choose, you need to choose one, a technology that helps with one of those things. But of course, it's doing it is the hard part, right? So very much in line with kind of what my message is whenever I talk about this. This is something that I feel like I keep wrestling with, and no matter how many times I ask it, I never really feel like I understand it completely. So I'm interested in your take. What has made digital quoting and international logistics such a tricky thing to build and gain adoption around, right? Like, I mean, there's been lots of approaches, but what's the core of why it's so difficult?
Yeah, so there was never an urgency for digital quoting pre-COVID. And during COVID, the shipping lines, they moved to spot rates. That was actually, if you look at it, what made a lot more interesting for a technology company like us was when shipping lines started moving towards a dynamic rate management themselves. And they wanted to become an API company. At the end of the day, all large companies want to become an API company. They would finally want all their data points to be taken in the form of APIs. So we realized that that's what was happening with the large shipping lines of the world. And they want data. Their core, their fundamentals are to sell a container at a lot more profitable way. And they were sticking to their basics, and they made the spot product available for the market. And that moment, freight forwarders, most of the freight forwarders, I think more than 90% of the freight forwarders who used Excel sheets to manage rates, they all felt that this is a difficult way to procure rates. And at that point in time, digital quoting became a need rather than a want. Pre-COVID, it was a want. Everybody wanted to look like an enterprise freight forwarder to have a digital quote or send a quote on a PDF on a letterhead with their logo. So it was more about bells and whistles pre-COVID. But during COVID, it became a need where you have to share data from the shipping line in a lot more structured and stable way. And that's when we realized that when a real workflow becomes a need from a want, that's when digital quoting became a lot more important. And that's what we do. We provide integrations with the shipping line, and we ensure that a freight forwarder can quote to their end customer in a sustainable or structured way. And we provide both the options. You can send a PDF quote if you want to, because some forwarders, they stick to PDF quotes, right? Or you can send a link to your customer where your customer can click and action on those links. They can negotiate, or they can basically place a booking directly. So which is basically empowering your customers. So we provide both the options for freight forwarders, and we are seeing forwarders also moving from PDF to a digital kind of a quote in the purest sense by sending a link to the customers. So that's happening.
So I'm glad you brought up the API stuff, because that's definitely an area I wanted to explore with you. And I feel like that's one of the things we talked about in our initial conversation a few years ago. But I wanted to get your thoughts on another question that's sort of just been out there for a long time, and I've certainly written about it and brought it up. But the difference between digital quoting and dynamic quoting or dynamic pricing, right? Can you explain sort of the fundamental differences between those two, and where the market is in terms of true dynamic pricing versus just providing a static quote online?
So here we have to address the basics of the rates given by shipping lines. When shipping lines, they give rates, they give two kinds of rates. One is the contractual rate, which has a longer validity, and they purely ensure that they give it to forwarders who give them better volumes to ensure that their bare minimum number of containers are being loaded on the vessel. And they have spot rates. So right now, last 1.5 years, that spot rates have always been going up. So and shipping lines were not honoring contract rates for certain trade lanes. But now spot rates and contract rates are merging, right? So sometimes spot rates are going down, sometimes they're going up. So when it comes to dynamic pricing, a freight forwarder needs to understand what kind of rates do they have with shipping lines at any given point in time. So it can be a spot, or it can be a contract, it can be a named account. For that matter, they need to know that these are the rates procured by their pricing team, or these are the rates that are available in the market at this point in time. That's a dynamic price. And how this dynamic price is sent to their end customer, and where you add not just your basic ocean freight, but also the origin charges, the destination charges, which happen in multiple currency, if you want to add value added services like customs and fumigation and others, and finally packaging the logistic cost for the company who wants to move the cargo from point A to point B. That's basically a digital quote. So if you get your house right when it comes to dynamic pricing, that's when you can get the digital quoting piece done. That's why we feel rate management is the base for everything. You need to understand how your supply side works when it comes to how they make the surcharges, how they give you rates, and how often these rate changes, right? And this, if you get this structure, which is rate management, and then your digital quoting becomes far more easier. So it's not really the same, but digital quoting really leaches on top of dynamic pricing at this point in time. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And it's a good lead in, because I wanted to address the rate management piece, right? This is an area that I have been covering a long. I mean, rate management software predates kind of venture capital and fascination. This whole last 12 years of real swelling of investment into logistics technology. And I think what's been interesting from the market-wide perspective is probably the three biggest names in rate management software, freight rate management, selling to forwarders and NVOs. They've all been absorbed into larger freight forwarding, right? You had CargoSphere was bought by CargoWise in 2017. Magaya purchased Catapult, I think last year or 2020, maybe end of 2020. And then Portrix was acquired by Descartes last year. I believe that was last year. Again, everything is a big blur now. But so you had these sort of like core names in the market that were standalone that are now part of broader forwarding software companies. So that's the context. But you mentioned just a second ago, but I want to elaborate a little bit more. Why is rate management so important to sort of that like interface that a forwarder has with its customers on the quoting side?
Yeah, so rate management has two parts to it. So the rate management is how you procure rates. What are the best rates that are coming into your company, versus how these rates translate to an invoice finally. Right. So shipping lines initially, I'm talking about 2-3 years pre-COVID, basically, they always had uh, rates as a separate module where you can see rates, or you can have a contractual data at a separate place, and booking and invoicing as a separate module. So you have to log into a separate system to place a booking, whereas you have to basically get rates on an Excel sheet, or call and get rates, or even go to their platform to get rates. Now, slowly, large shipping lines like Maersk and others, they are trying to bind both of these together. They are trying to get, if you see a rate, you place a booking, something similar to an airline ticket booking kind of a model.
Right.
So if the rates are being stitched with booking and basically invoicing, it makes a lot of sense for a large TMS to also have a rate management, where, because the rate is going to ultimately get converted to quote. And a lot of times you need you need reconciliation to be done, because not always rate equals to invoice. So you need a reconciliation mechanism to also happen. And with rates changing consistently, you need to have a lot of rate logs into your system. You need to have index which compares your rate along with what's the market like. Are you procuring the right rates? So now, with data changing consistently, you need to look at external data, you need to churn internal data, and you also need to bind this internal data into actionable or commercial data. So these are the three things that's happening right now. And hence, large TMS systems, they cannot tell a customer that you manage your rates separately in a different system. You keep a back office in China or India to manage these rates and put it into our system. And then we will manage it for you. Hence, this kind of acquisition is happening. But again, fundamentally, the rates are becoming a lot more dynamic, and it's getting stitched to bookings. So, which means that there has to be a system which is cognizant of the fact that rate is not rate anymore. It's not standalone anymore. It has to become an invoice, and hence we have these APIs. We provide one single point API, something similar to what Amadeus did for airlines, where it switches all the rate APIs of shipping lines and the schedule APIs of shipping lines, and finally converts into booking. And we feel that shipping lines are really pouring a lot of money. They have a lot of money to pour into technology as well, which is the right step forward in them becoming an API-led company.
I wasn't aware if shipping lines made a decent amount of money the last year or so.
Yeah, I also think they made decent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not been a bad couple of years. Well, let's go into this, right? APIs. Can you kind of put yourself back in your headspace where you were when you first founded the company versus sitting where you are right now? What is I mean, you've alluded to this, but I think we should go deeper in it. Like, what are the container lines attitudes toward not just investing in, but being sort of amenable to, working via API with forwarders, directly with shippers? Like, what does that environment look like right now versus when you started?
So it's a lot better. People definitely understand what these abbreviations are, which was not the case before. So that's the start. And also all the large shipping lines, they have a dedicated technology team. They have great technology leadership to have a vision on how this has to be executed. But at the same time, when we were talking about 4 years back, I guess. So that was a time where we saw freight forwarders being okay with rates being keyed by their back office team members, because it took about 4 or 5 days for the rates to be pushed into their database. But the rates had a longer validity of
30 days.
3 months or 6 months. right? At least 30 days for that matter. So it didn't make a lot of sense. Now with shipping lines also pushing APIs and changing rates consistently, there needs to be a better way rather than a back office churning these rates. So freight forwarders are a lot more cognizant of APIs. These APIs need to be plugged into their system, and hence they're coming to us and saying that, hey, do you have one API, rather than me going and speaking with multiple shipping lines and getting their APIs. Or and also from a technology point of view, shipping lines technology team, they are going to treat freight forwarders the same way, right? Because it's they're going to give an API with their account ID, and the freight forwarders have to plug it into their system. But not a lot of people know that freight forwarders are also not that tech savvy, right? So they have a core business to handle. So like how shippers have a core business of either manufacturing or trading to handle, they are giving logistics to freight forwarders. Freight forwarders have a core business of managing shipments and not just technology integration. So they want these technology APIs or EDIs for that matter to be plugged into their system and managed, right? They don't want to be managing on behalf of shipping lines. If there's an outage, they don't want to be pinging shipping lines and asking when it will be up. They want a sustainable way to do that. And shipping lines also don't want to expose APIs to everyone in the market. They need a technology support team then to manage this. So they want to give it to only the chosen few who can distribute these APIs a lot more better, and also give it to the top 10 freight forwarders of the world who wants to consume it directly. So, and the moment you become APIs, the strange thing that happens is you think that you have structured a lot of things, but that's the implementation of these APIs into different system makes you again a service company, right? You need to start customizing a lot of things from these APIs into different systems. So you need to have the piping that I mentioned to ensure that you are structuring on the customer side of things, and you manage the API and manage the core services better. So hence we are reliably sharing that information from shipping lines to forwarders. It has been pretty well so far. A lot of large freight forwarders and even digital freight forwarders, some of the largest digital freight forwarders, they work with us in getting the APIs from shipping lines and integrating into their system.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm glad you brought up. There is a sense, and maybe I'm to blame for this partly. There's a sense that APIs are sort of this cure-all for everything that ails the industry. And I'm glad you brought up that you need to build them correctly. They're not accessible to whoever, right? They're not just all open. They generate another type of data or another like volume of data that needs to be managed as well, right? It's just different. It may be better. It probably is better, but it's not just a switch you turn on and everything is magic fairy dust. So really, really interesting. Well, let me switch gears a little bit because I want to get some sense from you sort of as you've gone through this progression and the model changed a bit. What, as you think back, what can you point to any lessons that you learned that were that stand out, or any sort of like in terms of building the company, anything that sort of surprised you compared to your thesis on going in?
Yeah, a lot of things surprised us from the time we started, because we are in an industry where it's full of surprises, and we are in an industry where the dynamics change from the demand to supply very soon, right? So one thing that is a big lesson for us, especially, and we really kept the values going according to that. We said that our solution, when we started, we said our solution is not going to be the best solution. It's going to be the solution which keeps which is going to hear what customer wants and see whether it can be it can be cut, copy, pasted to other customers, and then we make a product out of it. We never went with an approach of saying that, hey, this is the best solution, you need to buy the solution to become better. That was never our approach. We wanted to understand, because if you look at freight forwarders, and from an outsider point of view, freight forwarders looks like someone who buys and sells. But if you actually deep dive into every single freight forwarding company, you know that every single company has their own DNA, has their own workflow. You ask a freight forwarder, they say that I collect documents from this particular company, I do it in process A for this company, process B for the same company with different people, and they have their own DNA. So you cannot have a one size fit all kind of solution for everyone. You need to understand what's going on in this industry, and you need to also have early adopters who really want to support you in the journey. So, and that was our biggest learning. We said that let's not go with a solution and say it's a perfect solution, because we have seen a lot of companies do that over the past 4 or 5 years, and either getting acquired or not doing pretty well. So we wanted to just be a company which can build technology for freight forwarders, and freight forwarders really using it and saying, wow, this has actually changed the way that we work, or this has made me a lot more efficient. So that was our goal right from the start, and we were a lot more amicable when we went to our customers, and that helped us get a lot of customers, especially more than 100 brands working with us in over 40 countries right now. So that was the biggest lesson. And the second one is people are everything. So the more you get people who understand freight forwarding and logistics and who wants to create an impact in the industry, they're going to add a lot more value than people who have a particular skill or who come with a particular expertise. You want people who have the right attitude and passion to contribute towards the industry, and that has worked out pretty well for where we are. And the industry that we are in, especially the SaaS ecosystem that we are in, based out of Chennai, it's actually paid forward ecosystem. So we have a lot of founders telling us what to do, more often what not to do, which helped us build the company in a lot more scalable way.
That's great. I wanted to, before I move on, there was a question that came in, and it sort of piggybacked off of what you had mentioned about like making the software valuable to customers, right? So there was a question from Bianca about, is this a type of software where you expect savings, or is it more about sort of expanding the market that's addressable, so sort of expanding the top line rather than, maybe cutting expenses?
So we spoke about two pieces. One is the rate management, and the second is the quoting piece. The rate management is the savings piece. So we see direct 50% savings in terms of how you procure rates and how you can manage your rates in a better way. And if we are able to if we are able to give you a better perspective of how your procurement power is, that helps you save a lot of money in the market, especially at the way the market is reacting at this point in time. So that's the rate management is a savings piece. The digital quoting is a revenue game. So it's basically where you can increase your revenue. You can use the same number of salespeople to quote digitally. So the typical process of quoting takes about 24 to 48 hours. By getting all the data points structured, putting all the currencies in order, and then sending it to your customer. Whereas with our technology, it takes less than 2 minutes. So the salesperson becomes a lot more efficient, and we see the probability of winning the shipment when you quote increases by 100%. So that's actually a revenue increase game. So we would not put a blanket statement saying you can reduce your savings, because again, it's not a technology where you use and then you fire 50% of your staff. Right. But we believe that you need to increase your top line, as well as ensure that you are a lot more frugal when it comes to procuring, and a lot more analytics driven or data driven, because we feel that second generation or the next generation into the business, they're a lot more data driven and objective in the business, and they want data points to take decisions rather than taking a lot of decisions based on gut. And hence we feel that the technology is going to help the new generation who's coming into freight forwarding a lot more efficient and take data driven decisions.
Great. Very interesting. So a couple more questions. One is, I've had on this show a couple different people who are sort of in the forwarding technology space. How do you sort of see the way Freightify fits into this ecosystem, right? Because there's a lot of companies that have, there's those existing companies, the TMSs, the rate management companies, visibility, and then there's a whole bunch of companies of which you are part of this cohort that have emerged over the past decade. How do you sort of fit into that ecosystem, do you think?
Yeah, so a lot of companies right now are focusing on once a shipment is booked, right? So on the visibility, managing the shipment, documentation, and also making sure that the invoices are in order, right? So we believe that we want to focus on the pre-shipment or pre-booking phase. So to ensure that you're procuring better and also quoting the rates in a lot more structured way is what we want to specialize in. So we are focused on rate management and digital quoting. And we also believe that a self-service model is going to happen in forwarding. Not anytime soon, but it's happening slowly. So we don't want to push a forwarder to become a digital forwarder in about a week's time. So that's not our sales pitch. We believe that your customers want a self-service model, especially when there is a happy path involved, when there are not a lot of exceptions to manage. So to make a forwarder a digital forwarder over a period of, let's say, 5 to 10 years, they need to have the data right inside the system. They need to have the rates to be there inside the system. They need to crunch a lot of data points to know which kind of customer pays what kind of rates. So to lay the base to become a digital forwarder, you need to have these metrics in place. And we believe that these are the sanity metrics to have. And we also make a freight forwarder, digital forwarder, for people who want to get onto that bandwagon and start selling online. So that's where we focus on pre-shipment.
That self-service thing I think is super interesting. I wrote about this a year or so ago about you sort of have to build to where the market is going, right? And you have, as a forwarder, right? Even if only 10% of your customers even want something like a self-service model, you can't build it after that gets to 50 or 70%. You have to have already built that. So very interesting. Last question before we go. This is my new gimmick each show. What's your favorite music group or musician, and I need a reason why.
So more than the music itself, it all depends on my mood. I like I like to focus on the lyrics more than the music. So I like Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong. So more of jazz, and I like to listen to a lot of Indian music. A.R. Rahman. I'm guessing that you know him. So A.R. Rahman.
From Chennai, right?
Yeah, from Chennai, and he's also from Chennai and gone global.
That's probably his most famous international stuff, right? So
exactly. So and also from this part of the country, there's a musician called Raja. So I listen to them. So more focusing on lyrics and mood rather than the band or genre itself.
Cool. It's good. Well, it's good to have a range. I appreciate it. Thanks for. Hopefully, people will check them out. Raghav, thank you so much for the time. Really fantastic, insightful conversation. I know it's a little bit late there in India, having been doing this show there myself at this time. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show. See you.
Yep, absolutely. Fantastic. Great conversation with Raghav. Definitely encourage you to reach out to him. A really insightful person and really kind of measured in terms of how he thinks about the industry. So glad he could join us today. All right, you know the drill. After the guest leaves, I tell you a joke that you can then go and tell the rest of your family and get a bunch of groans when you tell it. Why wouldn't the ice cream give a speech? Public speaking joke this week. Because it froze. Come on, that's an easy one. I hope one of your kids already told you this one, so you could say it before I even gave you the punchline. I'm gonna have to up this a little bit. The joke writing department is slacking for me this lately. I feel like I need to get some quality control on that. All right, really quickly, we're gonna go into our last thing each show is Buzzword Explained. I feel like this is actually appropriate given the conversation that Raghav and I just had. Native integration. I feel like this is something I write about, and every time I write about it, my editors say, "What is this? Can you explain this in English to me?" I'm probably not the right person, as usual with these buzzwords. You should probably don't use a doctor on Google. If you want an actual technological explanation, you should actually go to someone who is like a programmer or a coder or someone who at least understands this better than I do. But I will give you my best explanation. Native integrations, when two systems are linked in a way that they are sharing information and there does not need to be a specific call from one system to the other as it would if they were integrated sort of outside. That's a very bad definition, but what I will say is do some research about native integrations and how they may impact the systems you're using with ones that you may want to use, or that are tapping into that system, maybe tapping into something that you didn't even realize is a native integration, and you're getting, data feed, or you're getting a sort of peripheral capability that you just saw as being given to you through your primary technology provider. So definitely do not just listen to what I said, but do some more research around the importance of native integrations. They are absolutely important to the way the industry is going, and very much aligned with what I talked about in terms of technology partnerships earlier in the show. So with that, a couple things before I sign off. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm saving this for people who made it through the entire show, who is interested in getting a discount code to either our JOC Inland Distribution Conference in Chicago next month, which is September 26th through 28th in Chicago, or TPM and TPM Tech, which are being held as usual next February and late February, early March. Reach out to me by email. It's eric.johnson@spglobal.com, eric.johnson@spglobal.com, or DM me on Twitter. My Twitter account's been up a few times during the show, and I will get you a special LogTech Live code and discount for that. So, thanks, Nicole, for posting that. So please reach out with any requests for that, as well as any feedback on the show. But I just wanted to say thank you all for attending. Really had a great time this show. It always goes so fast. Thanks to Raghav for joining us all the way from India, and really appreciated his insights. And thanks, as always, to the Let's Talk Supply Chain team for making this so easy and so fun for me to do. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll be back in a couple weeks.